A moment later, she remembered where it was and told him that someone had won her bracelet from her. He asked her what she meant by it and which god did it, but she replied that it was not a god, she was just like him. He was shocked to hear it and asked Nyx if she was saying that someone had been there before him and now her bracelet was gone. He panicked and wondered if he was not the only owner of that place and if, 5 years ago, someone else had been there. He asked Nyx if she remembered what the girl looked like. She replied that the girl was around 12 to 13 years old, with long black hair and was very pretty. Additionally, the girl had a weird symbol. He asked Nyx how the girl had won her bracelet and what they had been competing for. Nyx replied that the girl wanted to compete in creating objects and if she won, the girl would return her children. If Nyx lost, she would have to give the girl her bracelet. He was surprised that a little girl had actually won against the goddess of the night, who had created this world, and asked Nyx if she still remembered the girl's name. Nyx replied that she believed the girl's surname was Jai. A moment later, he began searching the asylum, knowing that if the girl had been there, there would definitely be clues. He looked around, wondering where it could be, then he spotted something under the table. He immediately bent down and grabbed it. He opened it and thought that the handwriting was ugly. Inside, she wrote to someone that she didn't know who he was, but she knew he was the real owner of that place, and by the time he found that letter, many years would have passed. She also told him not to laugh at her handwriting since she was still young when she wrote it. She apologized for using his asylum for some time, but begged him not to blame her since she had returned it. Plus, she admitted to borrowing something from his patient, but she promised that she would return it when she found him again. She reminded him that there was also a space below the office and when she grew up, she would come looking for him, as he was her only hope of getting home. Then the girl introduced herself as Jai Nyan. He lifted up the carpet on the floor, thinking that many more secrets were hidden within the asylum, and saw a door underneath it. He opened it and began to descend the stairs. When he reached the ground, he was surprised to find it was a prison. He began to walk around and noticed that it was empty. He examined each prison cell, wondering if it was just a deserted prison. But when he looked into one prison cell, he was surprised to see a huge monster sitting on the bed inside the prison cell. He looked closer and realized that it was the king of the ghost masks. The creature noticed him and immediately stood up, walking closer and attempting to grab him. Fortunately, he stepped back in time and wondered why it was there. The system informed him that this creature was a criminal. As a mythical creature killed by him, he held the power to decide the fate of its soul. The system then presented him with a choice. 1. He could destroy its soul right away and let it disappear completely from that world. Or 2. He could decrease its fear rate towards him to below 60 and hire it as a caregiver for the patients. The creature could also offer a certain level of protection, and its current fear rate was 1. Reading the system, he pieced everything together. Aside from managing 6 mysterious patients, it seemed the asylum also had the ability to harness souls. He realized that the mythical creatures he had slain would be housed there, and he could decide whether to let them work as caregivers. However, he wondered if the term mythical creature included gods, and if he killed a real god, could he make that god work for him? The creature screamed at him in anger, but he merely glared at it powerfully, forcing it to kneel before him. He asked it if it finally understood its place. Slowly, he touched it, telling it that it was strong, so it being a caregiver might be a good choice. However, it was a shame that it was unwelcome at his asylum. Activating his power, he shattered its soul, causing it to collapse dead on the ground. He then walked away as it slowly disappeared. The next day, he entered the office and was surprised to hear someone shouting that she had really encountered a monster. Confused, he quickly descended the stairs. When he was near the office, he heard someone ask the excited person if it was a mythical creature again, to which the person agreed and claimed that they wouldn't believe her even if she told them. He peeked sneakily into the room and saw an old lady furiously telling Ying that her husband was not himself. Ying tried to calm the lady down, asking her not to panic and to slow down. However, the lady was still angry, explaining how her husband used to hold her hand when they went out, fearing something might happen to her, but he had stopped doing that the previous week. Ying calmly asked the lady to continue. Suddenly, the lady angrily grabbed Ying's hand and squeezed it, insisting that her husband was definitely having an affair with a vixen. Kai, hearing this, was stunned and displeased. A moment later, Kimo held the old lady's hand and helped her leave, while Ying reassured her that their firm would handle the situation. Kimo then bid the old lady goodbye. Kai asked Ying what was going on, and Ying replied that it was just part of their regular work. Kimo returned from seeing off the old lady and told Kai that since he was new, he probably didn't know that in Kangen City, real mystique events only happened 5 to 6 times a year. Therefore, they usually assisted locals with minor investigations, which kept them occupied and financially stable, and occasionally led to finding some clues on mystiques. However, Kai was displeased, asking if their work included investigating an old man's affair. Ying assured him that it was normal. He sighed, resignedly agreeing since he didn't have a choice. Ying then informed him that their captain wanted to see him at the training ground, to which he responded affirmatively. Then he proceeded to walk down the stairs and open the door to the training ground. He walked inside and saw Mui, focused on meditating in the center of the room. Mui opened his eyes and asked if he was present, to which he replied affirmatively. Suddenly, Mui threw a long sword at him, which he grabbed in surprise. Mui explained that his sword, cape, and badge would be given to him after the training camp, and he could use that sword for now. He looked closely at the sword and saw King Cheng's name on it, making him realize that it was old Zhao's sword. Mui slowly stood up, informing him that he was someone Zhao had chosen, so he should take care of Zhao's sword. However, he didn't respond and kept silent. Mui walked closer to the practice swords, informing him that there was only a month before the training camp started and he would teach him some skills during that time period so he wouldn't embarrass himself at the camp. Mui picked up the practice swords and told him that from that day on, he would practice sword fighting with him in the morning and learn about the Forbidden Ruins with Kimo in the afternoon, and then learn about guns at night with Xuan. Mui then suggested that they should begin. However, he protested to his captain that it was a real sword. But Mui just firmly looked at him and told him it didn't matter because it was all the same. He pulled his sword out of its sheath, telling Mui that he would have a go at him. Then he looked at Mui firmly and ran towards him to attack, but ended up being thrown into the boxes on the side. He coughed up blood and in pain on the ground. Mui pointed the practice sword at him and sternly ordered him to stand up again. He smiled and grabbed his sword to attack again, but continuously lost, making a loud noise that could be heard outside by Kimo. Later, he clenched his hand in anger and was in the clinic to get treatment. He was dizzy because of his training while Kimo bandaged his body and told him that he looked like he had talent. Kimo also told him that the first time he sparred with their captain, it left him lying down for a day because Mui's attacks were just too fast, too strong, and too cruel. He told Kimo that even though it was just training, he remembered how Mui had beaten him up multiple times. He added that Mui's strikes were still that heavy and he didn't think Mui was going easy on him. Kimo told him that Ying was probably the only one that could put up a fight with their captain. He asked Kimo if Zhao couldn't do it, then cleared his throat shyly. Kimo replied that if it was Zhao Kencheng, it wouldn't be called a fight because they were equals. Then Kimo patted his shoulder, telling him not to worry because the wounds he had received were just minor injuries. Kimo then took out something from his pocket and told him that now that his PE class was over, they should discuss the Forbidden Ruins. Kimo asked him how far his ability could reach now. He confidently replied that with him at the center, he could sense anything within a 20-meter radius. Suddenly, Ying walked in front of them and Ying walked past them. They looked at her as she walked by and stared until she was gone. They looked at each other and he seriously told Kimo that it was white, to which Kimo happily gave him a thumbs up in agreement. They then clapped their hands together like good partners. They composed themselves, and Kimo informed him that he would explain what the Forbidden Ruins sequence is. Kimo cleared his throat, then proceeded to describe it as a human-devised measure of risk concerning the Forbidden Ruins. The smaller the sequence, the more dangerous the ruins are considered. He explained that Forbidden Ruins beyond sequence 600 are classified as harmless. Those ranging from sequence 400 to 599 are termed low-risk Forbidden Ruins. Although these ruins could potentially be lethal, they generally pose little danger. With reasonable usage, one can achieve surprising results. Next, sequences from 200 to 399 fall into the category of Danger Forbidden Ruins. These ruins could pose a significant threat to human society. Possessors of these ruins will have the ability to combat mystiques. For sequences 9199, they are labeled high-risk Forbidden Ruins. Possessors of these ruins have considerable fighting ability. Anyone who holds such a sequence is considered exceptionally rare, 1 in a million. Their captain happens to be one such individual. Kimo further explained that sequences below 89 are considered extremely dangerous Forbidden Ruins. These ruins are not only capable of large-scale destruction but also bestow upon their wielder strange, special abilities. These particular Forbidden Ruin possessors exceed the realm of human abilities, even having the power to obliterate an entire city. Kimo added that if Zhao could awaken the 83 obliterated moon, he might already have ascended to the rank of general. Zhao nodded silently in agreement. Kimo flipped the page of the book and informed him that his Forbidden Ruins sequence was 3, the Holy Mortal. Kimo cautioned him not to let it inflate his ego, explaining that 3 is the Seraph's Forbidden Ruins sequence, not his, and it would only count as a high-risk Forbidden Ruin in a rookie's hands like his. He asked Kimo if his power was incomplete. Kimo clarified that his current ability leaned more towards sensing and predicting. Even though he could use the Seraph's Kamui, it was far from the true power of a god ruin. It could either be that the Seraph only gave him a small portion of its power, or that his other abilities always existed, but he just hadn't been able to feel them. He fell silent, staring at his hand. Suddenly, Chemo slid in front of him, showing him their surroundings and explaining that their training was designed to allow his ability to integrate with his body. They looked inside a room filled with guns. Chemo elaborated that there were 39,000 miniature air guns in that room, capable of firing approximately 39,000 rubber bullets per second. Chemo then instructed him to use his sensing ability and dynamic vision to dodge these bullets. Chemo clicked something on his phone, and the guns moved in their direction. He informed him that considering his boundary, they would start with 50 shots per second. Fearfully, he asked Chemo to wait and questioned why he felt a sense of impending doom. Suddenly, guns appeared beneath him, causing him to panic. He asked Chemo why there were guns beneath his feet and what would happen if they hit a sensitive area. Chemo simply responded that in real-life battles, attacks can come from any direction, and there was no such thing as an area that should be inviolable. Chemo then clicked his phone again, and a voice announced the start of their training. The guns pointed in his direction and began to fire. Chemo calmly walked out of the room while Kai is dodging the rubber bullets. Once Chemo is outside, he closed the door, leaving Kai alone. Kai stared at the door in anticipation, realizing that what Chemo had said was the true purpose of this training. Multiple guns pointed at him and fired simultaneously, causing him to shout in frustration about why he had to be the one getting beaten up. Outside, Chemo, who could hear both his shouts and the bullets hitting him, was smiling gleefully. Meanwhile, at school, Yifei was about to leave when a man asked him why he was walking so slowly. He replied that he was on his way. The man placed a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him that the situation was only a murder, and not something to be overly concerned about. The man observed that Yifei seemed to be constantly on guard, then asked if he was always so easily frightened. Annoyed, Yifei brushed off the man's hand, telling him that he couldn't possibly understand. The man asked what he meant, but Yifei merely rummaged in his jacket pocket. He suggested they drop the topic and head home. However, he stopped suddenly, causing the man to inquire why. Yifei informed his friend that he had forgotten his key and urged them to go on without him. His friends left, suspecting that Yifei was dealing with numerous issues. Upon returning to the school, Yifei swallowed hard, fear gnawing at him as he proceeded inside. Moments later, he arrived at their classroom building and opened the door to their classroom. He peeked inside, seeing nothing, and immediately went in to retrieve his key from his desk. Suddenly, he heard footsteps and wondered if someone was approaching. Quietly, he looked out and spotted the academic director walking alongside their Chinese class representative. The lady held the director's hand, asking him to pause for a moment. Yifei watched them, puzzled as to why they were heading toward his classroom. The teacher entered the room, and the director inquired about the woman's concerns. She confided in him, telling the director she had something important to share. All the while, Yifei was hidden under the teacher's desk, trembling in fear. He surmised that the lady, Liu Zioyan, had romantic feelings for the director. But given the director's age, nearing 50, and his patterned hair loss, Yifei was bewildered by Zioyan's taste in men. The director asked Zioyan what she wanted to express. Shyly, she admitted that she had always harbored a desire. She licked her lips, and as Yifei stole a glance at them, he watched Zioyan's face and eyes transform. She morphed into a snake and stared at the director hungrily. The director screamed in horror as she devoured his head. Oblivious to Yifei's presence, she continued consuming the director. He remained hidden behind the teacher's desk, shaking in terror at the gruesome scene he had just witnessed. Blood dripped from the director's devoured body onto the floor. Meanwhile, somewhere, Kai was examining a part of the gun while Xuan explained to him that guns were the treasure of human intelligence. Xuan also informed him that for a beginner like him, guns served as a lifeline. Although they might not have much impact on higher boundary mythical creatures, against lower boundary mythical creatures, guns were more effective than cold steel weapons. Xuan picked out a timer and told Kai that he should demonstrate his skills. Then, Xuan started the timer while instructing him to begin. Kai immediately discarded the instructions and started to assemble the gun. He tried to recall everything he had learned and told himself to remain calm. A minute later, he inserted the magazine into the gun and loaded it. He then aimed at the target and started firing. He stopped firing, aware that he had completed the task, and looked at the bullet holes in the target. Confidently, he asked Xuan to evaluate his skills. Xuan inspected the target and informed him that he had actually missed the target at such a close range. Xuan even suggested that a blind person would have had better aim, causing Kai to wonder if he was as good as a blind person. Kai walked outside and stretched his body. Reflecting on the day's training, he realized he had been roughed up by their captain and hit by rubber bullets. Even though the distance support classes weren't that tiring, he just didn't seem to have a knack for it. Suddenly, someone called his name, causing him to turn in surprise. He saw Mui holding a huge bowl, asking him what he was staring at and inviting him to come in and have dinner. Feeling shy and at a loss for words, he nonetheless took a seat with the others. Xiangnan told Ying that he had taken the meat first, but Ying angrily retorted that she had seen the meat first. Mui then offered to make 2 more dishes just for him if he didn't like the ones already prepared. This gesture prompted Xiaonan to admonish Mui not to show favoritism. Xiangnan insisted that Ying let go of the meat, but Ying vehemently replied that she wouldn't. This prompted Mui to shout at them both to let go of the meat. Additionally, Mui warned Xuan not to brandish guns at the dinner table. Later, as they returned home, he lay in his bed, exhausted but feeling that his day had been well spent. He then remembered Mui advising him not to grip his sword too tightly because it would hinder his ability to switch between defense and attack. Reminding himself not to squeeze the sword too tightly, he swung it powerfully in the air. After stopping, he told himself that he should try the exercise again. The following day, he walked the streets with dark circles under his eyes, well aware that he had overworked himself the previous night. Suddenly, Ying shouted for him from above and informed him of a situation. Moments later, he entered the room and asked Ying what was wrong, and whether mystiques had appeared. She replied affirmatively and explained that they were particularly difficult to handle. As they walked together down the corridor, she told him that they had just received news of mythical creatures reappearing, this time at Kanan City Second High School. To his surprise, he found Li Yifei sitting across from Mui and Xiangnan. Yifei looked at him sadly and questioned his presence. He awkwardly informed Yifei that he was now a temporary member of the Night Watcher team. Standing up in shock, Yifei expressed his disbelief as he'd heard rumors of him joining the army but never thought he'd actually see him there. Mui cleared his throat to regain Yifei's attention, suggesting that they could discuss it later and should focus on the case for now. Yifei sat back down and asked where was he. Xiangnan reminded Yifei that he had gone back to retrieve his key when he saw the creature consume his academic director. Yifei responded fearfully, confirming it had happened, but not entirely. He continued, recounting that the previous day, he had returned to school to pick up his forgotten English homework. That's when he saw the creature grab the director, slowly place him in its mouth, and swallow him whole. Suddenly, something moved within its body and it regurgitated a massive egg. The egg wriggled uncontrollably, and he was surprised to see a hand emerge from it. His surprise turned to shock when the director climbed out, unscathed. The director, eyes a ghostly white, looked up at the snake. The creature returned to Zai Oyan's body and transformed into a face. It hissed like a snake and stared at the director. He added that he didn't dare move until they departed, hiding in a classroom until morning, before coming to report the incident. Mui and Ying sat in silent thought, while Kimo struggled to believe that the creature had swallowed and then spat out the director. Xiangnan closed the notebook he'd been holding and assured Yifei that he'd done the right thing. Xiangnan then explained that, apparently, this mythical creature had the ability to camouflage and assimilate. Mui addressed them seriously, stating that the creature had sparked a contagious infection within Kanan Second High School. Xiangnan explained to them that among all the abilities of lower boundary mythical creatures, assimilation is the most challenging to deal with. Even a slight lapse in attention can result in an exponential increase in the number of victims, causing harm to spread rapidly. Additionally, when it comes to camouflage, this ability is even more dangerous. It signifies that the mythical creature's intelligence is on par with that of humans. It can read the victim's memories, mimic their behavior, and even hold conversations without arousing suspicion. Therefore, they should prepare for the worst-case scenario. Ying asked Xiangnan what the worst possible outcome could be. Kai explained that by worst, Xiangnan was referring to the entire second high school getting infected and the infection spreading beyond the school. Xiangnan asked Yifei if he had ever considered the possibility that all his teachers and classmates in that school might have been assimilated. Or worse yet, perhaps he had become part of the monster without even realizing it. Upon hearing this, Yifei was surprised and clutched his head in fear, asserting that such a scenario was impossible and that he couldn't possibly be a monster. Kimo stopped Xiangnan from frightening Yifei further, reassuring him that if such a calamity had truly occurred, the disaster crown would have already signaled a warning. If the disaster crown remained silent, it meant that the situation was not yet beyond salvation. Puzzled, Kai asked Ying what the disaster crown was. Ying explained that it was a crow, but also a forbidden item. When major disasters strike in Kanan City, it emits a warning scream. Then, Mui asked Xiangnan about his plan now that the mystique had appeared. Xiangnan replied that their priority was to find the body of the mythical creature and determine the extent of the infection. Therefore, he suggested that they split into 2 groups for the mission. He told them that one group would use the social connections of the victims to locate other infected individuals, while the other group would enter the school, follow the clues, and find the creature's body as soon as possible. Kai instructed the 2 girls to change into uniforms since they were going undercover at the school. It was imperative that they blended in as students. The 2 girls examined the uniform before putting it on, prompting Ying to ask Kai why the uniforms were so ugly. Kai responded that the girls' uniforms were considered decent, but it was the boys' uniforms that were truly hideous. Shuin then handed him a gun, informing him that the magazine was full. This made Kai question if he might hurt someone due to his poor shooting skills, but Shuin reassured him that guns were not solely for killing. The two girls urged him to hurry. He concealed the gun behind his back, notifying them that he was on his way. The girls effortlessly vaulted over the school's high fence, leaving him in surprise. Ying advised him to use the comms for communication in case of any unforeseen events, to which he agreed. He started running. Recalling Xiangnan's instructions, Ying and Xiaonan were to investigate the academic director at the office building. He was to attend class and get close to Xiaoyan. His sensing ability was crucial for identifying infected individuals, and he needed to use it to check as many students as possible. Once they had a clear picture of the infection, their next action would involve odd changes, while the even elements remained the same. The symbols could be deciphered from the quadrants, and everyone needed to remember this. Walking down the hallway, he glanced into the classrooms. He saw 1, 2, 3, 4, and many more in different rooms. Xiangnang inquired about the situation, and he reported that it was dire, as there were already more than 6 on one floor. This news shocked Xiangnang and left Mui silent. Xiangnang warned them that if those mythical creatures went berserk and started killing, the students would not stand a chance. Remaining silent, he pondered the gravity of the situation. More than 6 victims on a single floor. If that number was scaled to encompass the entire school, he wondered how many lives would be lost. Mu ordered him to stick to the plan, continue observing, and avoid alerting the enemy. He sped through the corridor and stopped in a room, acquiescing to their captain's directive. He grabbed the door handle and opened it, announcing his presence. The teacher, in a fit of anger, asked him why he was so late and where he had been for the past few days. He explained that he had been having problems with his eyes again, leading to a 2-day hospital stay, which his teacher understood. He told him to hurry to his seat because the class was about to resume. He walked to his seat and noticed an irate Yaifai. He then remembered Yaifai telling Mui that he wanted to go too, and that he had seen the monster, thus he could serve as their guide. Yaifai bowed to Mui, explaining that he had wanted to join him for quite some time and aspired to be an unsung hero, protecting the citizens of Kangnan. Mui told Yaifai that if the operation went well, he would offer him an opportunity. He continued his stroll to his seat, noticing that Xiaoyan had turned around to look at him. Unfazed, he walked to his seat knowing that Xiaoyan was watching. Upon reaching his seat, he sat down as his classmates passed notes around, noting a man and woman engaged in the same activity. He then stared at the woman, who was smiling sweetly. A moment later, the speaker announced that class was dismissed. Yaifei approached him, whispering a question about the current situation. He replied, stating that he needed a chance to sense everyone in the school. Yaifei stood up, puzzled by his words. He explained to Yaifei that during the upcoming flag-raising ceremony, he would be able to assess the school's condition. Meanwhile, in another room, 2 birds were peeking through a hole. They flew around the room, near the nest affixed to the wall, while Ying asked the director if he was inside. Xiaonan checked the door, informing Ying that it was locked and the director didn't seem to be there. Ying pulled out a lockpick, playfully warning Xiaonan that their upcoming actions might land them in detention. She then attempted to unlock the director's office door with the lockpick. Upon unlocking the door, Ying and Xiaonan slowly opened it, calling out for the director. Convinced he was not there, Ying suggested to Xiaonan that they should quickly search the office before the director returned. They entered and Ying pointed out to Xiaonan that the cup on the desk was still warm, indicating that the director had not been gone for long. She then proposed that they begin searching the place for any clues. Suddenly, Ying detected a peculiar smell and set down the document she was holding, wondering if it was a stench. She bent down under the table, realizing that the odor originated from there. She pried up the broken tiles on the floor with her knife and was shocked to discover human skin hidden underneath. On the other hand, the school's loudspeaker blared, indicating that it was time for the flag ceremony. On the stairs, Yaifei asked Kai for a straight answer. How many are in our class? He replied that there were 2, Xiaoyan and Han Ruoryuo. Yaifei then questioned him about the present crowd, asking how many were there. Kai replied, the 5th girl in line is also one. Yaifei informed him that the girl was Tianlai from the neighboring class, who shared a dorm with Xiaoyan and Ruoryuo. He realized that most of those infected were girls, prompting him to wonder if the origin could be traced back to the girls' dormitory. Outside the building, he reported to Ying that the source of the infection might have originated from the girls' dormitory. Ying replied that she understood and they would proceed to investigate. Moments later, as the ceremony was nearing its conclusion, Yaifei asked Kai if he had finished sensing. When Kai responded in the negative, Yaifei warned him that the music was about to end and they risked being caught. Unfazed, Kai assured Yaifei that he had his methods and continued walking towards the stage, leaving Yaifei perplexed. As he reached the flag, he told his classmate, who was on duty, that he was not needed, then proceeded to hoist the flag himself. He explained to the bewildered man that the school director had given him an emergency notice that an outstanding student representative needed to raise the flag and deliver a speech. Introducing himself as that outstanding student representative of the 11th grade, he instructed them to hand him the flag, even though he was already holding it. As the man was about to interject, Kai cut him off, telling him that if he had any questions, he could ask the teacher after the flag-raising ceremony. He stepped onto the stage, announcing to everyone that the flag-raising ceremony was about to begin. Kai and Yaifai reached the stage and Ryuryuo remarked to her classmates that Kai was handsome and resembled someone. Her classmate quickly hushed her, reminding her that there were teachers nearby. On the other hand, Yaifai observed Kai from behind, wondering what Kai was thinking. Kai closed his eyes, consumed by a bad feeling. When he opened them, he was shocked to see that many students had been affected. Then, he exited the building, leaving Yaifai both confused and surprised as he walked past the mark. The other students whispered about his mistakes, and the teacher shouted at him, stating that he had walked too far. Yet, he merely jumped off the stage and hastily ran away, frantically reporting to their captain that preparations needed to be made. Elsewhere, Mui advised him to calm down and report his status. Kai informed Mui that he sensed the entire school, at least 60 or more students and teachers, had been infected. He stated that it would be challenging for them to handle the situation discreetly because the number of infected was too high. He also warned Mui that once they threatened its original body, those 60 infected individuals would attack the other students. If any of them were to leave the school, it could result in a disaster for the entire city. Mui implored him to stay calm, assuring him that they had already infiltrated the perimeter. While swinging his sword at a monster, Mui faced an infected student, revealing that they had investigated Zioyan and the academic director's homes. A venomous liquid was released to attack Mui, but he easily dodged it, informing Kai that the infected families had also been infected. The liquid that struck the frame of Ryuryuo and his father slowly dissolved. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 3 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.